It was their 11th anniversary and was meant to be one of the best nights, but it became the worst night for not just the couples, but the lady in question here. She filed for a divorce only to find out that she was left with nothing. Somehow, fate brought her together with another lady who was passing through the same hell in her marriage, but was scared of divorce and losing her only means of survival. She and her friend, who's a lawyer, helped the lady to recover 90% of her cheating husband's property until it became a matter of helping other women who find themselves in unhappy marriages, and also a means to make money from these wealthy folks who came running to them. Everything changed when they got the big client, but first they must present a case of infidelity to a man who doesn't socialize or womanize. She must be the one to seduce him to find him guilty of infidelity, but along the line she fell in love with him because he was different from other men. Now, the question is, will she do her job and commit him to cheating, or will she save him from a woman who is perceived as a gold digger? Before I begin, I would like to tell you that most times when we see these wealthy men in public spaces, we all wish to be like them someday. But what if I tell you that some of them are arrogant demons with their wealth behind closed doors? It is the 11th wedding anniversary for these couples. Going out like it was their first date to make it a memorable one is the desire of every couple. But what if I told you that this night ended in regrets? Fabian already had something in his mind to tell his wife, Eloho. To him, their marriage of 11 years was a waste of time with miscarriages and disappointment. When he looks at her, all he sees is a woman who adds nothing to his life, but spends his money on meaningless things and wasting her time in idle gossip with friends all day. Eloho just sat there and digested all the insults until it was time to leave. I can tell you that these influential women that you admire on social media today and wish to be like them also wish to have never started this journey of getting married to the wrong people, all because of fame. Fabian was not just an arrogant rich man, but a monster. This is what Eloho has been dealing with for the past, as she got the beating of her life this fateful night. Gari is her best friend and a divorce lawyer. She felt sorry for Eloho with her swollen face. What kind of a man does this to a woman he professes love to on the night of their anniversary? She swore to do anything within her powers to help her. It didn't take an arm and a leg before the ladies did what was right. It is a divorce paper. The next day, Eloho went to get her hair done at her favorite saloon. She was about to pay for the services when the POS machine declined the transaction. At that point, Mrs. Pry already had an idea of what was going on as she quietly watched. Eloho brought out another ATM card to try, but it failed again. This was unusual to her until Mrs. Pry opted to pay the bills and told her not to worry as she told Eloho a story about how she found herself in such a situation one day and a good Samaritan bailed her out. Eloho came back that night to find all her belongings outside. He was also the reason behind the failed transactions that happened earlier on by blocking her from all bank transactions. Eloho was surprised to find out that she was leaving the marriage without a dime. One mistake some women make before getting married is that they fail to understand the terms before signing the papers. Eloho signed a prenuptial agreement papers 11 years back without the consent of Gari, who would have helped her out. Besides, she married for love without thinking that one day like this will come. Eloho signed those papers without knowing that if she filed for a divorce, she wouldn't be entitled to any of his assets. Could this be the reason why he pushed her to the wall with all his monster attitudes towards her, so she can divorce him? Another smart move Fabian did was that he removed the infidelity clause from the papers in order not to get a hold on him should he be caught cheating on his wife. Eloho just realized her mistakes. She has no choice but to stay with her friend for a while she finds a way to fix herself. Eloho applied for several jobs with high recommendations, but she couldn't fit in because she lacked the required experience while age is not favorable on her side. Another mistake most women who married a wealthy man do is that they fail to seize the opportunity to build a career or a business should things go south. She was on the phone with Gari with the different interviews when a car batched hers. She came down to have a quarrelsome moment with the driver when she found out that it was Mrs. Pre. She was in so much tears and pain that she couldn't concentrate. Eliho asked her to hang out with her so that they could talk. Mrs. Pre happens to be in the same predicament with Eliho, but she was scared of divorcing her cheating husband, who rubs it all over her face. Eliho found out that she knows her husband, who is a popular, wealthy man in the country, with his herbal product that boosts women's fertility. Eliho also used the product which helped her conceive, but she lost the pregnancy to her brutal husband, Fabian. Mrs. Pre was the secret behind the successful herbal product years back, but her husband hijacked the idea to become what he is today. She was scared of going back to nothing, especially to her children if she filed for a divorce. Eliho already had an experience with her mistakes and all she learned from Gari as a professional divorce attorney. She went through Mrs. Pry's marriage documents to find out if she has a chance to get half of her husband's assets if she filed for a divorce. Mrs. Pry was also willing if Eliho could help her. But first, she needs her friend's help. Gari was not comfortable with the idea of getting in other people's business, but she told her that they need to get proof of evidence of Mrs. Pre's husband cheating. They were talking when the doorbell rang. It was Dumaybe who completed the triplet as best of friends. She just arrived from the Bahamas and has got many gist for her friends. These ladies all seem to be in the same pari persu, with their men cheating on them. But Dumaybe's case is different here because she is not married. Eliho initiated the idea of helping Mrs. Pry out. The both ladies had to come together to convince Gary that helping women from divorcing their cheating husband without suffering the consequences of going penniless is a great idea. She had no choice other than to join the bandwagon. First, they need a sexy lady to seduce Mr. Pry. Dumaybe got the perfect hookup site to scout for the perfect lady for the job. After checking through different sexy ladies, they got what they wanted. Now the problem is how to get pictures of him cheating. Gari had the perfect solution for this. Rufus happens to be the best private investigator that she knows. His efficiency for any kind of ludicrous job is unquestionable. Men like Mr. Pry, who wants everything big under the skirt, shouldn't be a difficult task. The most important thing is that every woman knows the kind of size her husband likes as side chicks. Mr. Pry fell for the trap like a rabbit and her favorite maze. His videotape was already everywhere when his wife and her lawyer stunned him with the video. Mrs. Pry now had the confidence she needed to confront her husband with divorce papers. Eliho's niece, Edna, came to visit her after her NYSC. She was surprised and also happy that her auntie finally left her toxic marriage. Gari also brought good news that Mr. Pry's lawyers, under the implications of losing all his assets if they decide to go to court, proposed to give her 40% of her husband's properties. This was good news to Mrs. Pry and Eliho also. They were dumbfounded when Gari told them that she rejected the proposal. Gari, as an experienced attorney, countered the offer of 90% for her client, since Mrs. Pry is the original founder of their successful company, which they finally accepted. This should be the biggest win of the year for the ladies. The good news didn't stop there. Mrs. Pry will also become the new CEO of the company, as the ladies went shopping for the newest CEO in town. Only if you have been in the shoes of almost giving up, and suddenly a miracle springs up. Mr. Pre has only 10% left of his total assets. Losing it now wouldn't be funny if he decides to make it difficult for himself. This was a win-win situation for all the ladies. Eliho and her team made 10 million Nira for a job well done from Mrs. Pre's case. Mrs. Pre was so thankful for the eye-opening gesture from these ladies. She was about to leave when she remembered something. She has a number of influential friends who also need help and are willing to pay a huge amount of money to regain freedom. Eloho saw a great opportunity from this, but Gari told her to drop the idea. After much argument between the ladies, Eloho was able to convince her that there are women out there like her and Mrs. Pry who needs help. This literally was the best idea to the ladies. They had to rent a space with the money made from their first deal, and with the best team at hand, which is Rufus, Dumebi, and Edna. Now, to their first client, Mrs. Ogene. You know the secret of every successful startup is to be able to identify your potential client before starting. Mrs. Ogene's husband is a drug trafficker aside from beating her up at every given instance. She just wants to be sure that she and her daughter are financially secure when he is apprehended by the law. The ladies were surprised when Mrs. Ogene was willing to pay 30 million naira to help her win the case. She also signed them a check of 60% to commence their investigations. Gari did not approve of the fact that Eloho broke their rules of engagement, which is, they need to run a background check to know if their client is not framing up the allegations before accepting a pay up front. The ladies were still on a concluding part when Edna came in. They have an urgent situation at the reception. The ladies went down to see for themselves when they found out that there are millions of women out there crying out for help to be heard. To Eloho and her team, this is a new venture to tap into for better rewards. Rufus ran a background check on all their clients' complaints. They found out that some of the women were looking for a way to falsely accuse their husbands of infidelity, to run off with their boyfriends or girlfriends. Some also are the predators and aggressors in their marriage, which means that it's actually their husbands that need help. It was surprising to hear that of all the ladies that came last week, only 5 were legit. Could this mean that there are women who wish to just reap off their husbands all in the name of love? Everything was going smoothly with their successful achievements of helping innocent women regain freedom when the big one came. Mrs. Bankola was referred to here by an influential friend of hers, and she needs their help. It's evident that this lady has been facing real torture with her bruised face. Ever since her husband lost his first wife, he had been abusive and angry at every slightest cut, and the rate at which he cheats on her cannot be described. All Gari and her team need is proof of his infidelity, and she can get compensation when she filed for divorce. Rufus did his job background check to find out that her husband runs a multi-million-dollar company. He also has no time to socialize, or does he have friends? After his work from the office, he has a 2-hour session with his therapist, and he is back home. The question is, how possible can a man with such discipline be a monster at home? It was going to be a difficult task looking for a woman to set him up. Rufus found out that he will have a short trip for a couple of weeks, away from home, so he will need a new therapist pending when he returns back. Now they needed a lady to fit into that position as his new therapist. Mrs. Bankola knows the kind of woman that could get the attention of her husband. She recommended that Eloho was best fit for the job. She was willing to triple the offer of 70 million naira. If Eloho agrees, Gari suspected a foul play from Mrs. Bankola, but the offer was mouth-watering to abort. Eloho finally meets with Mr. Bankola. He is such a gentleman who lost his dearest wife, the only woman he ever loved. Ever since then, he has never been able to fix himself until he got a therapist. Eloho finds this man different from others. Aside from him being a gentleman, he is a generous guy with 3 NGOs in the northern part of the country that provides food, shelter, and education for the poor. Gari and Dumebi are more emphatic about her playing her role in seducing him, but it wasn't easy for him because he is still hanging on to his late wife. Gari advised her to use his late wife's favorite song, Food or perhaps Color, to get him in the mood. Eloho had to try again. This time she got even closer to him, but this guy couldn't let go of the only woman that he loved. He finally got comfortable speaking after several days. They were having a great session together when her phone rang. Ilaho's ringing tone sounds familiar to him. It was that of the favorite song of his late wife. He kept reminiscing on how they danced together with her favorite music. Ilaho obliged to dance with him if he doesn't mind. This lady apparently has every attribute like his late wife. He felt something down in his soul with the music, until he kissed her like it was his late wife in his hands. To most men, it is a moment of weakness. It only takes a few men with self-control to say no. Every woman notices this strength in every man. He is indeed a man of worth to Ilaho, and setting him up on camera will be unfair. She made sure that she cleared all evidence against him by collecting the drive and removing all the cameras in the living room. She wants to start on a new slate with him whenever he comes back. Mr. Bankole did come back, not for a therapy session, but to complete what they started. Gari and Dumebi are so mad at her with her unprofessionalism that could cost them a big client like Mrs. Bankole, and why she couldn't handle a decent job for the first time. But will you blame a woman who found a man so unique, unlike every random man out there? She wanted to know if all his wife said about him is true. Mr. Bankole told it that he has never hit a woman all his life. She could tell that he was telling the truth in his eyes. Days later, Mrs. Bankole came to the office to know how everything was going. She wasn't convinced that the ladies could handle the task, so she gave them a week to give her answers, or she called it off. She was about to leave when Rufus brought to her what she wanted. Rufus knows that he can make a fortune from the deal if the ladies wouldn't play their cards. Mrs. Bankole just discovered his affair with Ilaho when she found out that he already filed for a divorce. She had to escalate their little secret about how she paid Ilaho to seduce him with the pictures she gave to him. Mr. Bankole knows that he is ruined with the evidence of infidelity now that he filed for divorce. She also gave him Ilaho's complimentary card to make his findings. Meanwhile, Ilaho and her friends thought that it was high time that they shut down the company for reasons best known to them. Perhaps they may get into trouble with the law for blackmailing some of these men of infidelity so that the women can get a huge compensation and they make their profit. Suddenly, Mr. Bankole walked in. Everything his wife told him was true, that he was blackmailed so he could be ripped off. Can we say that these ladies have gotten themselves into much bigger problems when he find evidence that he was seduced by Ilaho, who is part of the team? Watch out for the therapist.
Thanks for watching. Please comment your thoughts and also like and share this video for more super amazing videos that we are bringing to you. And if you're watching from our YouTube channel, you can also subscribe and turn on your notification for more. Thank you.